Well, good morning, everyone. I am so excited to welcome you all here to our weekly call. And I just wanted to clarify for those that are brand new that may not be aware of what we do is every single Wednesday, we get together for a Corona Chamber business briefing. This is our advocacy and action call. This is where we bring you up to date on most current items. We have a gentleman by the name of Jeff Gibson who owns Occidental Communications Group, and he and his team put together late breaking information for us. So often we are the first to hear things even before it's like out there. So it's kind of cool. To run the meeting and to be our chair for our advocacy is a gentleman that I have just grown to respect and so fortunate to have in our community. He's a former elected state assembly member. His name is Jeff Miller. And Jeff served locally as a mayor here in Corona and on the city council prior to him going on up to the state assembly. Jeff is a business owner for many years. He has a insurance brokerage firm, and he understands what all the business people are struggling with. Even long before COVID was around and now with the recession, Jeff has understood how difficult it is for people to make payroll or for them to pay the electric bill. All those things are just normal business things. To live within a budget, and just because you have a budget and you have something budgeted for expenses, if the revenue is not coming in, you got to cut somewhere. And Jeff has that knowledge, and he was able to work in the state of California with various elected officials to bring common sense to some of the laws that were being proposed. Today, it's a different kind of landscape, and we're fortunate that Jeff is able to kind of navigate and direct and help us through the tough times so that we can better understand how and what we need to do. I recently polled some of our members, and the members appreciate the fact that we have someone at the table watching out for their best interests. And with that, I would like to turn it over now to our chair, Mr. Jeff Miller.
Thank you, Bobby. As always, you make me blush.
Blush away, buddy. Blush away.
Let's get right into it. I want to, the legislature is going back into session now, and it's been a fairly quiet July on the legislative front, but as you know, and as we've been talking about the last few weeks, the economy and the financial situation of our country is of utmost importance. I want to thank our sponsor for today's meeting, which is Robertson's Ready Mix. For over 50 years, they've been the leading producer of ready mix concrete and construction aggregates throughout southern Northern California, all the way into Nevada. Robertson's is committed to establishing long-term valuable business relationships by providing customers with quality materials at competitive prices. Thank you, Robertson's Ready Mix, for sponsoring our meeting. With that, there's a little chat button on the bottom. If you have any questions, feel free to send those in to the chamber host. And we'd like to get right into the announcements so we can get on to Jeff Gibson. I'd like to introduce Anthony Maldonado to give a few updates, or Stephanie.
That would be me this morning. We are definitely glad to have Stephanie with us, joining us live all the way from Tennessee. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for tuning in. So with that, I want to give a few announcements today. First and foremost is our Coffee with an Entrepreneur tomorrow. We did move the dates to Thursdays now. They will be Thursdays on all even months. So we are very excited to have guest speaker Marina Miller joining us, Dr. Marina Miller. She will be joining us and giving us her little presentation on how, she is the founder of End Health and Beauty. She's an Army vet who proudly served her country for 9 years. So we are definitely glad to have her joining us. If you have not registered, please do so. It's going to be an amazing talk, and we are really, really glad to have her joining us with. So I will go ahead and put the link to that in the chat. If you want to register, we would definitely appreciate to have you here. The next thing I want to talk about is our mega mixer. The all chamber mega mixer is coming up on August 18th. This will be held at the Temecula campus of Mount San Jacinto College. It's going to be a huge networking opportunity in collaboration with many of the local chambers in the area. Admission is just one business card, or if you do not have a business card, it is only $1. Exhibitor spaces are available, so please see the link that I'm going to put in the chat to learn more. And the third event that I'm going to be talking about is our Good Morning Corona coming up on August 19th. We all know it's going to be held at Eagle Glen Golf Club around 7 o'clock. Registration starts at 6:30. It's going to be a very special program as we are honoring police and fire. You know, these are our local heroes, and we are so glad to have such an amazing organization here in Corona. So register now if you have not done so already. We also do have some sponsorships and exhibitor tables available, so check out the link to learn more. And the last event that I want to talk about, sorry, 1 second. Let me pull that back up. Last event that I do want to touch on is our Women's Leadership Conference. We have over 500 attendees registered so far, and it's going to be a really great and awesome event. We are expecting this to be just stellar, even more stellar than last year. So we have a bunch of amazing and inspiring guest speakers lined up. Like I mentioned, it's going to be a really stellar event. And we also do have a couple of exhibitor spaces left. So if you would like to have an exhibitor table, please contact us at the chamber and we can get you all that information and set up. So for more information, I will go ahead and put the link in the chat. And I think that is it. So back to you, Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. Great update. Great stuff coming up. So before we get into Jeff Gibson, I'm always appreciative that our mayor joins a call. Corona Mayor West Speak joins a call. And before I give him a few moments, if he wants to take it, I see our chair of the board is on the call, and I don't know if she has a few words. Paul Bender-Badesha.
Thank you, Jeff. We so appreciate you. So lucky to have you. Because West Speak is on the call as well, and he's been following this theme too. We, as you know, we have a great, vibrant chamber here, and I just wanted to encourage everybody. Obviously, as we're heading either in a recession or heading into more uncertain economic times, when you do business and have to buy services or work with a vendor, really prioritize looking at the Corona Chamber members first, and certainly businesses within the city of Corona. Not only does this keep jobs local, it helps support local jobs and our local economy, but the sales tax goes right back into our city as well. And so that is a great way. If you need products or services, it's a great way. It's a win-win for everybody. We're supporting each other. Jeff Bezos isn't going to be worried about our little companies, right, when the recession comes. And tempting as it is to order on Amazon, and I do too, it's so easy. It takes 3 seconds to buy something. Look around. I went onto the chamber website the other day because I needed my windows cleaned at the office. I have a lot of windows. They get dirty very easily. And I found Green Clean Windows and called them up, and they were so pleased to hear that I had picked them because they were a chamber member. So I would just encourage you to look at the services that you use every day, the products you use, and aim to do business within our local chamber membership, but also within the city of Corona where possible, so that that money flows into our local economy. Thank you.
Paul Bender. Before I hand it over to our mayor, I just want to thank Peppermint Ridge for coming on the call. I'd like to recognize our nonprofits here in town that make up the fabric of our community. And I'm assuming you're still hiring lots of people, right? Danny, Jim? Yeah. Put your contact information in the chat, and if anybody's looking for work, Peppermint Ridge is hiring. With that, Wes, welcome again. Thank you. Appreciate you spending a few minutes with us here.
Thanks, Jeff. It's always a hit and miss. I think I told you before, I have a meeting at the same time, and it got canceled this morning, so I was happy to join. Yeah, I want to reiterate, thank you, Paul Bender, for the relationship that we continue to have, and that focus on bringing jobs here and people buying here. It's a message that we need to continue to say. Got a council meeting coming up on Wednesday. Not a ton of really interesting stuff. We have we're re-upping our contract with the chamber, which is a good thing. We're going to be augmenting our contract with the City of Riverside's helicopter service, so we have coverage there at a fraction of the cost of us having to do it ourselves. And then lastly, probably the most exciting thing, at least for me, because I like transportation, is WRCOG has done a pretty extensive review of travel patterns in the city using some cell phone data and some other kind of, I call it creepy data, figuring out where people are going and when they're going there. So they're going to be presenting that at the beginning of the meeting, talking about travel patterns, what percentages are leaving the city, the county, origination, things like that. So I'm excited to see the results of that and seeing how we can use that, in our Live Work Corona program and working with the chamber and its, Corona 2024, 2028, I always forget the number. Jeff will correct me. That's all I got. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Wes. We really, again, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the call. It's very meaningful, and it says a lot about the quality of person you are, that you actually care and have an opinion about it. So thank you. With that, let's get right into the meat of the matter. I'd like to introduce Jeff Gibson from Occidental Communications Group. I've worked with Jeff for over 20 years. He's been in business almost 35 years. He specializes in political consulting and government affairs and government relations. He's worked and specialized in areas of housing and transportation and economic development and crime issues, just to name a few. With that, Jeff, oh, there you are. Welcome.
Hey.
Make us happy.
Thanks.
Make us happy. Make us happy.
Sure. Okay. We'll go with that. That seems to work. So we have a couple different things today. We're diving into the Inflation Reduction Act, which, if you've been paying attention to the news or will be paying attention to the news in August, you're going to be seeing a lot about. It was recently announced by the United States Senate. It's essentially a slimmed down version of Build Back Better, and but it has several different important provisions for us. But before we do that, let's jump into where we are, where we have been as an economy, where we are moving as an economy, and not putting any labels to it other than just facts. So the Fed has a target, has several different economic targets that it hopes to hit. 2% on 2%. Inflation is something that they have as a long-term target. About a 3% growth rate in the economy is a long-term target. So let's look and see when we've hit that as an economy and when we haven't. And you can see as we start here with on the first slide, the conclusion is in the title, buckle up. We're looking at 40% higher inflation and extremely slow growth, according to the Fed and multiple other sources. Between now and 2025, actually, we're looking at inflation about 40% higher than the Fed target through at least 2028 if the Inflation Reduction Act were to pass. And to look at that, you look at, we've looked at the economy going back to 1946. So between 1946 and 1972, inflation ran at about a 3% rate, year over year average, and we had a gross domestic product increase year over year on average. There were several recessions. Some of them were very tough, some of them weren't, of 3.23%. So that goes through a very large swath of the American economy, of the American economic history in the 20th century. Then looking at 1973 to 1981, because there was a change in federal government strategy in 1966, it was called Guns and Butter, in which we declared war on poverty and war on North Vietnam at the same time. Federal outlays went from about 6% of the economy to about 23% of the economy. And very quickly, what you saw was the phenomena, and which lasted throughout most of the 70s, of an average inflation rate of 9.2%. And as you can see, even with the rate of inflation running at 9.2%, you would expect to see, if you were getting healthy growth, you would actually have growth above that. But what you ended up having was growth of about 2.6%. So we actually missed pretty much every economic target that you could possibly miss in the 70s. Anybody who lived through that era can attest to it. And so flashing forward to 1982, after the very difficult 1981-82 recession, which actually started in the last months of 1980, the Fed increased its the rates it charges to banks and the rates banks charge to each other up into 21 points to tampen down demand. And you're going to be hearing a lot about the concern that there's too much demand. And while that also means all of us on this call, what you're looking at is since 2009, the federal government has increased by almost 4x on the size of its outlays. And all government, all total, has increased by 5 times. So that's local government, that's state government, that is federal government, has increased in size by nearly 500% during that period of time. That is going to show up in an economy ultimately. So if you switch to a different type of vodka, that might help your bottom line. And it might have a very small impact on the demand picture, but obviously what we're spending in Washington, D.C., what we're spending in Sacramento are going to be very, very key to actually doing what we call dampening demand. So you look after we were able to tamp demand, which is the net growth of government, essentially is one of the key components to the increase in economic demand. From 1982 to 2019, you had inflation running at about 2.7%, and you had growth running at about 2.8%. So there again, there were years that were great. There were years that were fallow. There were some recessions. The 9/11 attacks in 2001 occurred. So you're looking at a very long-lasting economic run that clearly that we are no longer in. And so going into the current period, we're looking at growth 9.1%. Inflation, which is almost precisely where it was in 1973 to 1981 on average. We're looking at net growth of negative 1.5% for 2022, with 2 of the last 3 years in either a named recession or something that is acting a lot like it but has not been named by the National Economic Board of Review. And so we're not going to wade into that. We're looking at what the bottom line impact is for you guys. on a day-over-day basis. So now we went forward and looked at the consensus amongst economists, the Fed, and banks. And what we're looking at now is somewhere in September, we're supposed to be returning to an inflation rate of about 2.8%. How that is to occur, sitting here with all of you on August 3rd, is difficult to describe. But starting in Q3, the inflation rate is supposed to dampen substantially, and by the end of the year, we're looking at 2.8% on inflation running out through 2025, and then the Congressional Budget Office, in analyzing the Inflation Reduction Act, said that they were assuming that inflation was going to be about 2.8% through 2028. So that is substantially higher. It's 40% higher than we've been experiencing in the last 5 to 10 years. And so that's going to be something that you're going to want to figure into yours. Now, the thing that stuck out to me was when they looked at GDP in a supposedly a recovery mode, you're looking at 1% GDP growth. So 1% economic growth year over year for the next 3 to 5 years, according to what the economic consensus is currently. So while that is substantially better than negative 1.5, if you look at each of these other eras that we lived through that are roughly about the same period of time between 2020 and 2028, what you're looking at is negative economic growth because you're having inflation run ahead of GDP growth. So this is something to keep in mind and pay attention to on our trip when we're in Washington, D.C., for those of you that are going to be going with us, because we are going to be spending a lot of time dealing with the economic impact of the Inflation Reduction Act and having folks that either vote for that or against that explain why they felt it was important to do that. So we have invitations out to every member of Congress from Riverside County. Congressman Takano is currently traveling in Asia with the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So in any case, but we're working with the congressional offices and other speakers to get into exactly what the Inflation Reduction Act is, because frankly, every single person who owns or employs who owns a business or employs other people is going to be targeted by the income tax provisions of this act. So it would spend, so Anthony would probably want to go on to the next slide, the Inflation Reduction Act slide. So $437 billion in annual spending is added on an ongoing basis between now and 2027. So that's $437 billion a year, $45 billion a year, which is kind of going to get a lot of the attention in the next week, is on the expansion of the IRS, specifically in the audit department responsible for going after, for auditing employers of less than 50 people, and personal corporations, personal trusts. And so you're what the IRS is looking at, and the way they described it in the bill, in testimony already, is getting into that they need to get into the weeds. So that's where they're looking, and I guess we live in the weeds. So there you go. It extends a number of subsidies that were supposed to be temporary on healthcare, on climate change, to Tesla and to other electric car companies, because as we know, that technology does not pay for itself. It relies almost exclusively on federal subsidies. All of those subsidies were supposed to have a sunset. Those have all now, if this bill passes, those will be extended for another 3 years, with a strong promise that in 2026, they will no longer be extended and no longer exist, because then the inflation reduction occurs. So as you can see here, the bill is scored it's analyzed by the Congressional Budget Office as if starting in September of this year, we go from 9.1% inflation down to 2.8% inflation. But none of the inflation reduction provisions within this bill kick in until 2027, and they would require Congress to make the almost historically unusual act, no matter which party is in charge or what is occurring in the U.S. economy. It is highly unusual to have Congress remove a subsidy once it is granted. And so what Congress would have to do in 2026 is remove $437 billion worth of subsidies annually to a number of different organizations, including the IRS and others. So I just ask yourself, when was the last time that occurred? That would be during the Clinton years, when Clinton was working with a Republican-held Congress, and we spent about 3.5 years in budget surplus, if you remember. So that was the last time that occurred. And previous to that, you would have to go back to the early 1960s to the Eisenhower administration to find an economy that operated in a national budget that operated in the black. So it's occurred twice in the last 100 years. So hopefully it would occur again, or since the end of World War II. But if it doesn't occur, if it doesn't occur, you're looking at a minimum tax on all corporations that do not have offshore subsidiaries of 15%, and that's on most revenue. So while it is not an income tax, it is a corporate tax. So corporate taxes are like this, or minimum taxes are often levied on revenue as opposed to income. So if you are operating a small corporation, you are probably going to have you're very likely to have your financial results and filings looked at by the IRS in an audit environment, and you're going to be facing a 15% corporate minimum tax. And the taxes reach down depending upon how the lifestyle decisions that you make to hit most Americans who are making more than $40,000 a year in taxable income. So, and again, the deficit reduction measures kick in 2027, when the spending in the bill, because some of the temporary spending measures are set to expire, would then change to so that you get the revenue that ends up being higher than the spending. So in any case, happy to discuss anything with you. The legislature is back in session. We are reviewing all the bills that are up, and we'll have a full report next week.
Anthony, any questions in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat.
Wow.
Boom.
You stunned us into silence again, Jeff.
It happens apparently.
Well, let's see what happens next week.
Yep. So keep up the good fight, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the detailed report. I wanted to put up our legislative contacts, our Assembly member Sabrina Cervantes and our Senator Richard Roth. There's their contact information if you need to contact their office. And I want to thank Annette DeMont from Riverside County Office of Education for coming on the call, as well as Kimberly Davidson from the fine city of Wildemore, and our mayor, Wes Speak. Thank you, Wes. Before we end, I'd like to thank Brad West from Office of Assembly Member Sabrina Cervantes for coming on the call, and see if he has any few words he wants to make in any announcements.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Not too much on my end right now. As you folks explained, a lot of bills going through, a lot of bills about to go through, mainly the Senate bills that are going to be heading through the Assembly now. So if you have some Senate bills that you want to comment on or write some letters of support or opposition to, make sure to get those in just as soon as possible. It makes our job a lot easier when we have them sooner rather than later. That's the only recommendation I have.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate you coming on the call. I see Sam is on the call from the Corona Regional Medical Center. I always like to go to him and see if there's any COVID updates or anything that from a health perspective, if there's anything we need to be aware of. I don't
quick COVID update. Our numbers are starting to go down. We are down to 12 today. We still have 2 in the ICU. We're seeing monkeypox in town, so we had a confirmed case at the hospital. So please be on the look. This is in Corona right now, so please watch out. This is the next thing that's spreading in California. So we had 4 suspected cases. 1 was confirmed.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. With that, I just want to thank Robertson's Ready Mix for their sponsorship today. You can learn more at rrmca.com. With that, we'll see everybody next week, Wednesday, 10 o'clock. Invite your friends, and we're going to probably get detailed into any of the legislation that's we've been following, in addition to the economic trends. With that, I would adjourn our meeting. Have a great week, everybody.